Hi, I'm Hannah from Singletrack, and I'm here with Dr. Chris Leatt, who is over in the UK doing working on your PhD so that you can be a double doctor. Yes?
I guess that's in reality what's going to happen, but not that that's an intention. It's more about writing up a lifetime's worth of work.
So, can you explain in simple terms what that lifetime's work is for us?
Well, and I started off doing medicine in South Africa. Actually came and worked in the UK for a year in doing some general surgery and internal medicine. Went back home, was a GP for a little while, didn't enjoy it at all. And then I went through a few rotations, orthopedic surgery and trauma surgery, and then decided to specialize in neurosurgery. So 2 years into specializing, always having had a passion for motorcycle racing. I was at an event, not riding because I'd been on call the day before, but my young son, who was 4 years old at the time, was with me. So we went and watched a race, and unfortunately somebody who I knew fell off and broke his neck and died during the event. And the paramedic asked me to come and assist, and we really tried to resuscitate. The guy's name is Alan Selby. And unfortunately, it wasn't successful, and we had to tell his family. And I came to the realization that my son, who was 4 years old, was also going to be at risk of breaking his neck. It turns out that Alan actually did break his neck, and that was his cause of death. And he's essentially led to the development of this company. So I went out and looked for neck protection, couldn't find any. And the more I looked, the more I wondered why there wasn't anything on the market. And it should have been apparent to me that it was going to take a lot of development work to actually bring it to fruition. But that's what I did. So I really started off with how people break their necks and what the mechanism of causation was, and what sort of injuries were apparent in two-wheeled sports, and whether there was anything you could do to mitigate them. And so I came up with this thesis, which is essentially an alternative load path. So instead of all the force going down your neck, if you fall in your head, some of the force goes somewhere else. And because not all the force has gone down your neck, the likelihood of an injury is actually decreased. So if you think about a high jump, if you raise their bar just a little bit higher, nobody gets over the jump anymore. And essentially, by taking off about 20% of the force going down your neck, the threshold for injury is almost unattainable. So the typical accident actually doesn't produce a broken neck. So that's the kind of theory behind the brace. It takes energy that would have gone down your neck and redistributes it to other parts of your body in a safe way. So a lot of work went into, first of all, testing the brace and testing the thesis, but also that we weren't causing other injuries as a result of changing, all the biokinetics. It's something you've got to be aware of when you splint a joint, or when you create an alternative load path, or when you put a helmet on, or when you do anything. You are changing the body's interaction with space and objects, and so you need to be careful that you're not causing more harm. So a lot of the work went into ensuring we weren't causing more harm, as well as, is this brace effective? And that's really where it started for me. Stopped my son from riding until it was developed, and now he can ride again.
Okay, so you started with a neck brace, which I have here as a prop. So this is a latest kind of design one. Can you explain, because I don't see that many of them around, really. This is in downhill racing a lot more. But explain how that works with the helmet to prevent not just a spinal injury, but also they prevent concussion too, don't they?
Well, that's the subject of my PhD, and a lot of work is going into proving that. So, to make an assertion, you've got to do a lot of testing, and that's what I'm busy with at the moment. So we know that the neck brace is highly effective at reducing neck injuries. The data published in motorcycle, not bicycle, but the mechanism of fall is very similar. Is the 10-year study that was done by EMS Action Sports, which showed about 10,000 riders over about 10 years, half with a brace, and I'm rounding up, and half without a brace. And the reduction in injuries, there was 89% less likely to break your neck with a neck brace on. 69% less likely to die of a spinal injury, 76% less likely to have a non-critical cervical spine injury. So we know the brace is effective in terms of its operation. So how that actually works, if you can imagine, I'm wearing a crash helmet, and what's sometimes misunderstood is that if you fall off and land on your head, it's actually the weight of your torso, and it's the inertia of the rest of your body. So you're landing upside down, and you're loading your head by the inertia of your body striking the ground. And essentially, your head will stop on, for example, the ground, and then the force will be transferred via the helmet, if you're wearing a helmet, to your skull base, to your neck, and then down to the rest of your body. So let's take a typical accident where you go over the handlebars. So you may land on the front part of your helmet, and that force is then transferred, given the weight of your body, through your neck. So a lot of the injuries we see from two-wheel sports, unlike, for example, car racing, where you're restrained in the seat, is compression injury. So it's compression with hyperextension, neck going backwards, or hyperflexion going forwards or sideways. So it's normally a combined element of compressive force with movement. If you're wearing a neck brace, and so I'm wearing the neck brace around my head, and now I fall and I land on my head, my helmet is going to rotate, because your head always wants to escape the impact primarily, and it's actually quite a good thing that there's some movement. That's why the neck brace is not connected to the helmet.
Right.
So the head and the helmet will move, and at some point in time it'll touch the brace. So I've got the brace off. My helmet rotates backwards and impacts the brace. And now what I'm doing is I'm transferring all that load onto the brace. Well, not all the load, about 20% of the load goes onto the brace. But that decreases the threshold for injury, and that's why we see a reduction. Now, as I mentioned earlier, what we've got to be careful of is that we don't cause other injuries whilst wearing the neck brace. So the neck brace is designed to fracture at the back, and it'll fracture at a small percentage of the force required to break your back. So it's been engineered to be a stable platform whilst it's reducing neck forces, and if it becomes too big and there's any risk of it breaking your back, it'll fracture and it'll just rotate out the way. Same with the front. There's a fracture zone built inside of the front, and if the force is large enough, it'll flex to a point and then fracture. And this we've demonstrated numerous times in the lab, and as part of our in-house testing, that if we launch a new model of brace, it's got to behave the same way as the old generation braces used to behave. Of course, they're lighter, they've got more adjustment now, but essentially that's why the neck brace works. It unloads the neck, and it's effective in that way. Now, what we've also been fascinated to see, the actual numbers, is that we believe that there's essentially three ways you can break your collarbone. One is a fall on an outstretched arm, and the force is transmitted up your arm and into your collarbone. The second way is a fall directly onto your shoulder. And the third way is if your helmet rim strikes your collarbone.
Oh, wow. You really got to twist your neck to get that far, haven't you?
And we thought that that type of injury was the smallest in percentage-wise, that, a fall in the arm was quite common. And then we had a lot of people saying, well, I broke my collarbone, and it's the neck brace that did it. But at least my neck is fine. And then the EMS Action Sports studied this phenomenon as well. Almost 10,000 riders, half with, half without a brace. And they found a 45% reduction in collarbone injuries wearing a neck brace. And because of the helmet rim not being able to strike the collarbone, because we've got this, what we call clavicle relief area, or collarbone cutout. So the helmet rim is now striking the neck brace and not striking the collarbone. And it's often people would say, I fell off and I broke my collarbone. Was it the neck brace at play? Well, if it was the neck brace at play, it would have been on the opposite side of your fall. Because if I fall on my left or my right shoulder, my head is going to go in the opposite direction. And if it's the helmet rim striking it, or pushing the brace onto it, you'd have the fracture on the opposite side. And that's where we saw the reduction of collarbone injuries using a neck brace.
So the people that are saying that they have broken their collarbone because of the neck brace, they'd have broken it anyway.
Yes, and they typically broke it on the same side as they fell. Whereas if it was related to a neck brace, it would have been the opposite side. Also other factors like down-driven fractures rather than up-driven fractures. But the numbers came out in this EMS study. And once again, it's a motorcycle study. However, the ways in which you fall, the fact that you're falling with compression and head movement, that you're wearing a helmet and you're not restrained, the injury patterns are very similar between bicycle and motorcycle.
So I guess lots of people would think to wear something like this because they'd be worried about the spinal injury. But you also think that this could protect your brain too, is that right?
Absolutely. So this is the subject of my work at the moment, and essentially, we know the neck brace is effective against neck injuries because all the lab testing and actually real life data is now showing that it is effective. We know it's effective against collarbone injuries, both in the lab. We've got instrumental dummies with collarbones, and in the real world, we're seeing a reduction in collarbone injuries. But if you consider that if you hit your head, a few things happen. One is that you decelerate your head very suddenly, and that's why helmets are actually effective. What a helmet is doing is, besides offering a hard shell and abrasion resistance and help you not fracturing your head, it's got EPS, and in our case turbines in as well, and that will crush if the impact is hard enough. So you're increasing the distance over which the head can decelerate. But now you have a body and a helmet. The head was traveling in space and decelerated suddenly, but it then starts moving relative to the torso. So you bang your head and then your head whips backwards. It's got to stop somewhere. It can either stop on your back or on your chest, or it stops in space somehow. But we believe with a neck brace on that by stopping it earlier, the secondary acceleration, deceleration of the head is reduced. And we also know that by wearing a crash helmet, you radically reduce the primary impact to the head, but you may increase the duration the head is exposed to that acceleration. And these things are important in terms of studying injuries, that we know that peak acceleration is important, but also duration is important. So, but once again, by putting a helmet on somebody's head, you are significantly reducing the primary acceleration, but you're also prolonging it. And then the helmet moves relative to the torso. And what our bodies don't like is more than one simultaneous impact. So, for example, if you hit your head really hard and you have a lot of inflammation, maybe you have concurrent injuries, you've got a polytrauma and you've got blood loss. Now you've got low blood pressure plus a head injury, so it's like a double hit to the body, and the recovery is significantly impaired by having more than one insult. So the work now really is to understand more than one insult whilst you're using a helmet.
Okay, so you're investigating at the moment that relationship between the helmet and the neck brace and the different types of length of injury that you could have. But I think people in the mountain bike world know that if you hit your head and you see stars, and then you need some time off the bike. But those smaller injuries, the frequent ones that you're like, oh, I was a bit uncomfortable, but you don't black out, whatever. I think people are just learning that those are bad too, yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think, a few years ago, concussion protocols were not in existence. And it was kind of left up to the person to make their own interpretation of how long they should be out of the sport and risk having another head injury. And also, it was believed to be a threshold, at a certain number of G, 70 G, for example, the likelihood of concussion was high. And if you had a significant impact like that, the concussion protocols came in place saying you need to be off the risk of being banged on the head again, because we know that for every subsequent concussion you have, your long-term prognosis is not as good. And there are a lot of degenerative brain syndromes that are related to hitting your head often. But the National Football League in the US has shown us that you can have non-concussive head impacts multiple of them during a season, for example, and still have organic brain disease or damage. And that's being studied more frequently now. And of course, they've got accelerometers in the helmets. They can record this over a long period of time. There are new techniques in terms of scanning the brain and certain tracts and anatomical areas in the brain to understand what the long-term consequence of repeated hit impacts is. And the data and the studies seem to show that you don't actually have to have a diagnosed concussion, but have multiple impacts, and you can still have brain damage over time.
And those multiple impacts, will they be ones that you'd notice, or are they just like you'd pass them off?
No, you would have hit your head, and you certainly know that you bumped your head, but you may not see stars. You may not have a headache for hours afterwards. Concussion can affect lots of things: your balance, your vision. So it's a significant impact, but not one significant enough to be called a concussion.
There's a lot to worry about if you're a mountain bike rider. So you could wear a helmet, you could wear a neck brace, and there was something else that you said earlier, that you could wear a gum shield, and that could also be effective. So
this is really exciting at the moment, is the ability to instrument things that we commonly use, like helmets, with accelerometers and gyroscopes, and actually measure how much impact or energy the head's been exposed to over time. And one of the ways of carrying something that's actually very close to the center of your mass of your head is a gum guard. And by wearing a gum guard, you can do two things. You can measure how much impact your head is exposed to, but also there seems to be some evidence that by putting a gum guard in place and splinting your temporomandibular joint, one is that a blow to your mandible is less likely to cause a concussion. And there's also some proprioceptive benefits from wearing a gum guard. Your balance in certain instances is improved. So there's a lot of exciting things going on at the moment, and being able to record the data. Previously, it was not possible, but to have such a small accelerometer with power in a gum guard and be able to wear it and measure it, same as helmets. In NFL now, a coach can call a player off the field if he believes that he's had a significant enough impact. It might not be a diagnosed concussion. But he's got a cell phone with an app on it, and he's watching the exposure of the player's head to trauma. And I'm not for 1 minute saying we should stop riding, because we've just been riding. But I think it's all about making an informed, balanced decision about, I've got to go to work on Monday. So how do I have fun and still go to work on Monday?
So we've seen in the mountain bike world lots of electronic things finding their way in. We've got shifting, we've got tyre pressure sensors. So you're using data from other sports for your studies at the moment. Are we going to see this kind of electronic monitoring stuff coming into mountain biking?
I think we definitely are, and there are some helmet manufacturers and telemetry systems that are already out there. But in order to really understand, you've got to have the numbers have got to be statistically significant. So we've got to have enough people using it, and a properly designed study is also required. So if you take a series like EWS or a defined series where every single incident is recorded, and the data is fed back, you can really make some assumptions about certain things. And of course, concussion is one of them. But I think we're definitely moving in that direction, and I think we'll definitely see better studies, more data in the future.
So it seems kind of foreseeable that down the line, we will have our own app in our own phones to be able to go, that was a big crash. I need some time out.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely coming, and it has some other advantages as well. It's got performance advantages. If you're carrying an accelerometer and a gyroscope in your helmet, one can see a time where that data is going to find its way onto Strava. How high did I jump, or what did I do?
How hard did I hit my head?
How big is my crash? We hope you don't start a competition to see how hard you can hit your head or how many times you can hit your head. But I definitely think it's coming in the future.
I can really see that the cumulative, like how many G's my head had across the last 6 months would be super useful information to have, and just to, especially for people on pro teams, I can imagine it could really change up the protocols at pro level.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's what it will lead to is hopefully protocols. Means, if this happens and this happens, we know we have a defined way of dealing with it. And of course, protection in athletes. Nobody wants to wear protection. I mean, you don't want to go out. We ride because we enjoy the freedom and we enjoy the speed. You don't want to. It's not our natural interest to keep on putting more and more protection on. But if you consider an athlete and their career, you may be doing well in a season. You have a significant injury. There goes the championship for the year. You may have broken just a collarbone, but it's enough to put you out for the season. And that affects the sponsors. It affects your longevity in the sport. So once again, I mean, one doesn't want to fearmonger. We still enjoy going out and riding, but I think it's finding that balance between protection and fun.
So I'll take the neck brace off you, so you've got less to hold on to there. But so at the moment, this kind of helmet with the removable chin bar is growing in popularity among us mortal riders. Is there any benefit apart from to your dental bill to having a full face on as opposed to an open face when it comes to head injuries?
So, I mean, a few things really. One is, of course, facial injuries. So not just teeth, but also facial injuries. And obviously the advantage here is that you can cycle uphill with it off, and you can put it on going downhill. So it will protect you against facial injuries. Also, it's a greater distance to decelerate. So the more the chin guard will flex and move and absorb energy, the less energy that's going to go to your head. So it'll reduce not just the facial injuries, but head injuries as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good compromise between weight, protection, and the freedom of cycling up hills. And
a neck brace only would work with a full face. It wouldn't work with a half shell?
So a neck brace actually would work with a half shell. We advise against it because we think that a full face helmet, if you're doing a significant downhill section and the risk of going over the handlebars is significant enough, why not add extra protection? The underside of the helmet is designed to interact with the top side of the neck brace. Your mandible, of course, your chin will interact with the neck brace, and it is a padded surface. And we've looked at how much energy it takes to fracture your mandible versus to stop your head. And it's safe to ride without a full face helmet. But I think, logic would dictate it's better to wear a full face helmet if you can.
So knee pads and elbow pads come in the kind of, these are going to stop you really hurting yourself if you really crash, and then you get the kind of, you can pedal in them and they'll stop things a bit. Is the neck brace, it needs to be like that, or it's not worth having? Is there a comfortable everyday rider version of a neck brace that's conceivable?
No, and there's some quite alarming things that are, well, not to mention names, but designs that are emerging in motorcycle racing in the US, where you just remove a component of the neck brace and say, well, it's more comfortable to wear. It's that shape for a reason. And if you look at the first neck brace and the current neck braces, and whether it's an entry-level version or one that's full of adjustability and carbon fiber and light, all the neck braces have the same features. It has to be that shape to work. And that's why over time it hasn't got, in terms of its geometry, it hasn't got smaller. It's got lighter and more adjustability and more ergonomically styled and more comfortable to wear. But the basic dimensions haven't changed because that's the dimensions you need. For example, if you can put your helmet over a neck brace, then the neck brace can act as a fulcrum. So you can actually bend your helmet around and your neck around the neck brace. And in certain instances, we've demonstrated in the lab that the rear platform of a neck brace is this specific shape and size, to stop your head from going over the back. So it has a lip that stops your head from going over the back, because if your head could go over the back, you can actually increase the torque or bending moments on your neck in a rearward extension. Also, this lip, interesting enough, is designed to fracture through this area, so that if you land flat on your back in this way, this will move out of the way. So you continue to lay flat. So you're not having the neck brace pushing into the back of your neck. But the shape of the neck brace is really important, and it can't really change a lot.
So we're not likely then to see people racing in EWS where they've got to do a load of pedaling up and down with a neck brace. They're going to have to focus on the technology that's in the helmet.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're catering for two different things, and essentially your risk profile goes up with downhill. Clearly, one of the most dangerous areas for the human neck is a sport like is horse riding. So you're falling at relatively slow speeds off a relatively high distance into a relatively soft medium, because there your head stops in sand, for example. It can't slide. So sliding is really good. If you look at the number of neck injuries that riders have in MotoGP, it's very small. In motocross, it's higher, and that's because of low speed and landing in a soft medium. Your head stops. So your neck is exposed to loading for a long period of time rather than just sliding out the way. So much like bicycle and enduro and downhill, it's all about risk management. And if there's a risk of going over the bars at speed downhill, particularly on a sandy track or somewhere where your head's going to stop against rocks or other obstacles, your risk of neck injury is going to be decreased.
I'll look more kindly on rocks then in future. They're better for me in some circumstances. So we are all wearing helmets. I mean, it's in the mountain bike community, riding off-road without a helmet is pretty much seen as madness. Yeah. But a lot of us are still riding in a half shell. So you've got some turbine technology in there, haven't you? Why the turbine technology?
So turbines do two things. So they're the little blue circular discs inside. They do two things. We were talking earlier about concussion, and we've spoken about lower impact magnitude, but over a longer period of time. So what EPS, which is typically the energy absorbing component of a crash helmet, the EPS foam liner in a helmet, is what will crush and crumple to protect your head. But it requires a lot of force to do that. So helmets are tested over a wide spectrum of impact velocities, 3.5 meters per second, and now up to, in motocross helmets, 9 meters a second. So it's a big range, and therefore the EPS has to be quite stiff. Otherwise, it's not going to pass a high impact velocity standard. So what the turbine does is, the EPS doesn't change, but the turbine offers lower speed damping, which might sound like I'm trying to look after a lower speed impact than a higher speed impact, but you're more likely to have repeated lower speed insults to your head over a period of time. And so low speed linear damping, in other words, just a normal blow to your head, is what the turbines do well with. And then the turbines, difficult to see in this instance, but they're displaceable. Sideways.
So it moves it
so
down,
they move around. So once the helmet is on your head and strapped onto your head, if you have a tangential blow or rotation of the helmet, the turbines will mitigate that rotation. So in the early days, and a lot of the head injury criteria in the beginning looked at only linear impacts. So in other words, you stop your head against a surface and your brain decelerates. But now it's known that rotational acceleration, you require a lot less rotational acceleration, a smaller amount of deceleration to produce a significant brain injury.
That's the kind of sideways glancing blow.
Correct. That causes the head to rotate. So this is why technologies like MIPS and the turbines are in existence now, is that we're catering for rotational acceleration, where you need less acceleration to produce a brain injury.
So you mentioned MIPS there. What's the difference between the MIPS and the turbine?
So the MIPS and the turbine essentially do the same thing in terms of protecting against rotation. They're surfaces that slide or move in a tangential direction. The advantage of the turbine over the MIPS is that MIPS is only for rotation, whereas the turbine works for low-speed linear damping as well as rotation.
So it has the squish in it as well.
The squish and the move.
Aha, right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So because of the testing requirements that there are and the so that you need the EPS, we're not going to have nice light moulded D3O swimming caps or anything like that in future.
No, so the standards are there, and thankfully a lot of the standards have evolved. So there was a period of time when helmets, there was Snell and DOT helmet standards in the motorcycle arena, and they just didn't evolve for a long period of time. And of course, what manufacturers do is they have to pass the standards. So they've got to make a helmet that will pass a standard. But now, with the understanding of different impact velocities and how important rotational acceleration is in preventing injury, the standards are evolving. Both bicycle and motorcycle standards are evolving, and that's a really good thing because it makes better helmets. So helmets now have turbines, MIPS, maybe more than one density of EPS that try to cater for a wider spectrum of injuries, because we don't just injure our brains with one very hard knock. We can injure our brains with lots of smaller knocks.
So from a consumer's point of view, there's a lot of different technologies out there at the moment with different claims, all quite bold.
Absolutely.
But we don't have the same star rating that they do like in American football now. Is that something that you think is coming to mountain biking?
I think it will come over a period of time. Of course, the other dynamic is that you've got to be sensible. In other words, you can produce an extremely good helmet in terms of impact mitigation. It would look like a golf ball. It would have dimples like a golf ball. It would be shaped like a golf ball. But who's going to wear a golf ball on their head? So we need venting, for example. As soon as you put venting in a helmet, if you had a stone or something impact the head and catch one of the vents, it's going to cause your helmet to rotate. So it's not a smooth slide, but smooth sliding is really good. That's why a golf ball would be good. So now we've added a feature that we need to ride, because you can't ride mountain biking with no ventilation. You need ventilation. So we've changed the dynamic. So we need to change the helmet at the same time. What can we do to mitigate the fact that we have not a uniform round shape, but we have something that is aesthetically pleasing, cooling, and protective, and hence changes to the comfort liner, changes to putting turbines in, and these help mitigate the effects. So, as I said right in the beginning of my journey in terms of neck braces, if you've got to show people what's good for them, because there's a huge amount of information. You've got to try and consolidate it. It's not an easy task. But if you make the most protective piece of safety equipment, but it's unwearable, nobody's going to wear it. If you make something that's wearable and really protective, but it looks absolutely terrible and nobody wants to wear it, it's not going to get worn. And ultimately, unless people are wearing it, it's not protecting people. So it's a balance. We need to find this balance between helmets that are cool, helmets that we want to wear, that we can, the apertures are big enough for your glasses or goggles or whatever you want to wear. But they've also got to be protective. And that's why I think to create a standard is actually quite a tricky thing. Yes, it's easy to look at the objective data in terms of head impacts and how well a helmet mitigates it, but the best performing helmet may not be the helmet that people choose to wear. It's all about balance.
So we're compromising our own safety by wanting to look cool then?
in part, yes. And just being pragmatic. I mean, how do you ride a helmet with no vents in it? Vents add a risk factor to helmets.
Sure. So you've now got a complete range of kit. You can have the clothing, the shoes. Those aren't safety elements as such, are they? That's just part of the package that makes something that goes with the helmet that maybe then people want to wear the helmet? Is that how it works?
Yes. So, we are now proudly a head-to-toe brand in both bicycle and off-road motorcycle, and that's been 15 years in the coming. It's been a lot of hard work. But I think it's important. It supports the brand and supports the safety element. And if people aspire to have, a piece of apparel or a piece of clothing with our name in it, they're more likely to wear a neck brace. They're more likely to wear a helmet with a turbine in. They're more likely to wear a knee brace. They're more likely to wear protective boots if it's motocross, for example. So, I think it's when we're a single product company, it's quite a risky place to be, because if something happens to that product category, that's the end of the company. But having head to toe supports the brand and supports the company. And right in the beginning, we were very sort of tech and solution focused. It was all about safety and injury mitigation. Not terribly cool. And now people are actually seeking us out for our apparel because it is cool. And we try and do things with our apparel, so not necessarily always protective, but also give you some competitive advantage in terms of the weight or the way the garment is cut or the materials it's made from, moisture wicking, and if you look at the panels traditionally for pant and jersey, they were 2D designs, and you had a design on paper and you used to sew them up and make them. Mm-hmm. They're all computer generated now, and they're all made on 3D models. And when you hold them up, they don't look like they're going to fit. You put them on and they fit well. So, I think that element of the business has really supported the protective element of the business. And it's a very exciting time for Leatt.
Okay, so you've designed all the clothing and the shoes and the pads, and has that then come full circle and informed your helmet and neck brace design?
So I think it goes down to materials and also new techniques for designing. So, the 3D software environment that our designers are able to use now are really advanced. So being able to design in 3D and some of the new software packages we're using for clothing design are really phenomenal, and they help inform us about surfaces and I wouldn't say there's a direct correlation, but there is a different understanding of the 3D element of design. But more than that, it's materials. The materials are really important because materials are evolving. So we're always looking for the next best material. Is it super energy absorbing? Is it moisture wicking? Is it very light? Does it behave in a different way? So, for example, these turbines behave in a way that don't obey Newton's laws of physics. The harder they get, the harder they hit, the harder they become. So, there's been a lot of development in terms of materials, and the turbines didn't start off in the helmet. They started off being materials we looked at for body armor, for example. So there is a correlation.
So where are we going? What's the future tech? Can you, either in kind of hinting terms or in revealing secrets terms, where are we going? So
when we say we, I think the industry in terms of standards is evolving, and manufacturers are going to have to meet the evolving standards. And I think, there's a lot more data being recorded. And from the more data that's being recorded, events are televised. You can actually put together an event that you see the outcome of a rider and something that you physically measure on them gives us a much better understanding about where the injury thresholds are and what you can do to prevent them. In terms of Leatt and new tech, suffice to say, we don't stop innovating. So we're always working on multiple blue sky projects at the same time. And they're either looking at the technology we've developed over time and finding a different application for them, or improving them or adding to the offering. So without delving into unreleased, still being tested blue sky projects. Sorry, Hannah. But there are a number. And I think, watch the space. It's an exciting company, and we're certainly nowhere near finished innovating and generating new product. And that's really what we thrive from. Is the science of the thrill. Is we want to allow athletes to perform better and for longer, But there's science behind it, and that's, I think there's still a lifetime's worth of work to do in terms of new products and new technologies.
So you started the company as a parent, seeing the sport that your son was going to go into. So final question, parents watching this, what one thing should they be insisting their children do to keep them safe?
I'm not sure there's one thing. I think you need to dress for the occasion, and make informed decisions, I guess. There's a lot of trends and there's a lot of background chatter about what is good and not good for you. But I think if you're going to put your child, let them participate in a sport where there's a risk of injury, you need to mitigate that injury as much as possible without going overboard and making their lives miserable. That's not a one-word answer or one item answer, but I guess it's just, dress for the occasion and inform yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Anna.